We're going to learn about how to get started with generative artificial intelligence. If you are just getting started, this is definitely the workshop for you. If you've been playing around with it, but you want to know a little bit more, this should fill the bill as well. All right, let's see if I can advance my slides. There we go. All right, so before we get too deep into it, I want you to take a couple of minutes and just think about what two questions are you hoping to get answered today? Or which two topics would you like to understand better? So let's just take a couple of minutes and write those down so we can set our intentions. All right, hopefully you had some questions in mind. Let's see. So I've got a question here. What is too much information to share with an AI platform? Oh, we'll talk about that. You could paste a bid you received in for ChatGPT to summarize without fear of it being seen elsewhere. Yeah, we'll definitely talk about that. All right, so a little bit about me. I am not a computer scientist, so I don't want anybody here to feel like they need to be a computer scientist to work effectively with generative AI technologies. I actually have 3 chemistry degrees, and this photo is of me teaching in a large lecture chemistry classroom that I helped design at the University of Kentucky. I spent 10 years there teaching and eventually achieved senior lecturer in chemistry. After that, I did come to EKU, where I was the Associate Director of the Center for STEM Excellence before transitioning over to the Faculty Center for Teaching and Learning. That was about 3 years ago, and I spent the whole summer thinking about what do my faculty need to know more about this fall to be prepared, and it was definitely generative AI technologies. So a year ago, I moved into this current role in the provost office, where I am the director of artificial intelligence strategies. And I spend my time writing institutional policy, maintaining a syllabus template for the university to use, where I add all of our generative AI syllabus policies for faculty to consider. And I spend my time training faculty, staff, and students on how to use GenAI effectively. Prior to that, I did spend some time in industry as a heavy metals remediation chemist. So right now, where are we at? What is the state of the art? There are literally thousands of AI platforms we can choose from today. And while that's all fine and dandy, what are people actually using to do the work? If we look at a reliable source, one that is not going to always be trying to sell us something, in my opinion, we see that Flexo's top 10 for work is a really good source because they're impartial. They're not trying to sell anything. They're just saying who's using what to get work done. And they do this survey on a somewhat regular basis. They were shooting for every April and October, but I see the most recent one was from February of this year. And so we see that ChatGPT is the top AI technology that people use for work. ChatGPT and the other AIs I have listed here in rainbow colors are what we call general purpose technologies or general purpose tools, GPTs.
Hey, Lisa.
Yes.
Did you want to take questions as we go, or you want to wait?
I will take questions as we go. Let me get through this slide and I'll stop and grab a few. Thank you. So we see ChatGPT has been the top one, and right behind that, we see Gemini was the number 2 spot. It slipped to the number 4 spot, and now it's down to number 6. Other GPTs we can consider are Claude. We can see it didn't even make the top 10 back in April of 24. It made it to 7, and now it's up to a 5. And MS Copilot is just recently entering the top 10 that people use for work. And I think we're seeing that because Microsoft Office has made this concerted effort to add Copilot to Outlook, to Zoom, to Teams, to everything that we use. So as people see it pop up as an option, then they're starting to use it more frequently. Canva, Leonardo, and Midjourney made the top 10 for image creators, but we can see that Canva is the only one that has persisted. We also have some AIs for research. So one we'll talk about today is Perplexity. Research AIs are different because they are built to go out and retrieve information. And then we have some AIs that are specialized for writing and editing. We see Quillbot and Grammarly are on the list. GitHub Copilot, not to be confused with Microsoft Office Copilot, is also on the list for programming and coding. And then some other ones that have made the top 10 include Poe. I originally thought Poe was mostly for writing, but whenever I checked the list today, it said it's more for social and characters. I'm not sure what that means. It's not one that I used. But Suno for audio and Gamma for AI presentation creation are also in the top 10 as of February. Okay, so taking a look at our questions. All right. How can you tell the database an AI is trained on? That's an excellent question. They won't tell you. A lot of times you'll find out what database they've been trained on when mistakes begin to seep through, and we'll talk about a great example of that. Let's see, what's another question? How can you tell if the AI is live to the internet, pulling live information as opposed to old information? That is an incredibly important question, and it's not going to be really obvious. And if you're in the AI and you ask the AI if it's pulling live from the internet, you're not likely to get a truthful answer. It's better to go to a different AI that you know pulls live from the internet, like Perplexity. It's literally built to go out and find that information and provide links to sources. And so I would ask Perplexity, is the OpenAI product I'm using connected to the internet? You need to know that, because if you ask an AI that's not connected to the internet, hey, what is the weather in Richmond, Kentucky going to be like on Saturday, September 13th? If that AI is not connected to the internet, it's going to take its best approximation for what the weather should look like in Richmond on September 13th of any given year, and it's going to return that result. And you won't know it's a hallucination if you don't recognize that it's not connected to the internet and pulling live information. So that was a great question. All right, another question. To know how is going to be used AI in the universities in order to understand how to prepare K through 12 students? That question is going to differ from one university to the next. And that's something that I've been spending a lot of time researching right now, because we're trying to develop policy for our university, and we're looking at other benchmark institutions to see how they're handling this. We're seeing universities adopt ChatGPT quite universally. The entire University of California system has adopted ChatGPT as their preferred AI, but then other universities are adopting boutique solutions like Boodlebox that offer a variety of AIs in one platform. And we've got questions we need to answer about how to tailor AI for teaching and research. And David said, I thought they all pulled live information. ChatGPT does pull live information. Not all of them do. Most of them do these days. But yeah, that's an excellent question, David. You want to make sure that your AI is actually pulling live information. All right, I think I am caught up on the pertinent questions. Some of these look like questions that we need to answer by the end of the webinar. So if I don't get to them, bring them back to my attention. We've got some time at the end. All right, so we looked at our top 10. What we're going to focus on today are the top 4 large language models. These are really the workhorses of getting work done. So we're talking about ChatGPT, which is an OpenAI product. We're talking about Copilot by Microsoft, which actually uses ChatGPT. What version of ChatGPT may change from day to day. ChatGPT itself, since it moved to GPT-5, for a while, we only had 5, and then they defaulted and let us go back to an older model, GPT-4, because people weren't real happy with how 5 was performing. I'm seeing now that they're kind of pushing people with usage limits on GPT-4 because now they think they have GPT-5 to a point where it's answering as good as, if not better than, an older model. And so they're pushing us back towards 5. Microsoft Copilot is going to follow that same trend. So whatever is going on with ChatGPT, hosted directly from OpenAI, is likely to be happening as well with Copilot. So if you have questions about Copilot functionality, go see what OpenAI is up to on any given day. Another one that's gotten a lot of attention and which seems to be favored by long-form authors is Claude by Anthropic. Of all the people I talk to on university campuses, it seems that the major preference right now is either for ChatGPT or for Claude. Those are the two I see used most often. But schools that are Google schools often have access to Gemini as part of their school account. So you can use your school email address and login information to get access to Gemini. So we'll talk about all 4 of those. And I think all 4 of those are decent options depending on what you're trying to accomplish. Their utility has fluctuated over time as they're developing these. For a while, if you wanted to do mathematics or physics, you had to go to Gemini because they were the ones leading the research on how to get large language models to do math and science most effectively. But since ChatGPT has been working on the thinking models and most recently GPT-5, we see that it's also doing fairly well with math and science now. If you compare these features across the board, there's 6 and 1/2 dozen. You'll see that there's always going to be a free version. I highly recommend testing 2 free versions of an AI before you settle on one that you're going to pay for. Paid versions usually start out around $20 a month. OpenAI also has a Pro version for $200 a month. And for a while, there was talk of a $2,000 a month AI that you could subscribe to through OpenAI that offered PhD level responses. I haven't heard anything more about that, and I haven't investigated any further because I see what most clever people are doing is getting the $20 per month subscription. And if they need more tokens to use the more powerful models, they just simply get a second $20 a month subscription rather than going up to that $200 a month tier. Multimodal refers to, do they also create images and sometimes video in addition to text? We see that Claude is very limited in this, but all of the other large language models do allow for the creation of images and sometimes video. Claude does not allow for web search since I checked most recently, but the other ones are connected to the internet. And then there's some key strengths listed there, but depending on your use case situation, depending on your discipline specific work, I would definitely, again, advise you to go back and find this out for yourself. Use the same prompt, test a few AIs, and see what kind of results you get. All right. Regardless of which one you choose, know that as soon as one of these companies comes out with a fancy new feature, the other companies are going to be in a race to catch up and add that same feature. We saw this happen with deep research. We saw this happen with Canvas, not to be confused with the learning management system. This is Canvas talking about the ability to take the output that the AI has just generated, opening it in a canvas, and then editing within that canvas to modify the output. I think the Canvas feature is a really nice feature because that was the first time I felt like I was truly co-creating with an AI because I didn't have to copy the output to a Word document, work on it, and then patch it back into the AI and say, hey, can you check for grammar and misspellings? Custom agents are also a really big deal right now. Custom agents are only going to get more powerful as the technology develops. Just know that if you are looking to build a chatbot or a custom agent, they're called different things depending on which platform you're working in. In ChatGPT, an agent is called a GPT. In Copilot, they went with the generic term agent, which is really useful. In Gemini, they got kind of cutesy. Gemini makes gems instead of chatbots or agents. And Claude calls these projects. So regardless of which one of these you're working with, they're all going to work in a very similar fashion. GPT, as we're defining it here, as in Chat GPT, is referring to generative pre-trained transformer. This is a type of machine learning that was based upon the 2016-2017 paper, Attention is All You Need. It described this transformer, this type of machine learning that allowed the output to be truly generative rather than discriminative. Prior to that paper, AIs were trained on a series of images. For example, we'll take a picture of every kind of dog we can find, and we'll say, this is a dog, this is a dog, this is a dog. And then we'll give an AI a picture of a giraffe, and we'll say, is this a dog? A discriminative AI can discriminate between a giraffe and a dog and return an output of, no, that's not a dog. It may not be able to tell you what it is, but it can definitely say yes or no to, is that a dog? In generative AI, we are truly generating novel content. And that's because it's pre-trained on these immense data sets, and it's trained to find these language patterns, or in the case of image generators, image patterns. The LLM technology is based on a series of different types of mathematical processes. But the main one that drives the output is the statistical text prediction. So if we look at this example of the Pangu Alpha Transformer Network, this is a Chinese AI. It was published probably 2 or 3 years ago, but it's the only AI that gives us a really simple view of how these things work. We've got this sentence, Boz the cat sat on the, and the goal is to finish that sentence with a single word. To do this, the AIs first tokenize each of the words. So it may take 1, 2, maybe 3 tokens, depending on the complexity of the word, to turn that into a string of numbers that the AI understands. So keep in mind, these AIs are not spelling these words out. They're chunking them into these tokens. That's why when this article was out talking about how many R's are in strawberry, the AIs were failing to say there are 3 R's in the word strawberry because it wasn't spelling it out. It was maybe using 2 tokens, one for straw and one for berry, to translate that word into a numerical string that it could then manipulate. Once we've tokenized the word, then we consider the position of the word, and we pass this information into that novel transformer layer. And those transformer layers then pass this information to the query layer. And they say, okay, we need a word that would fit best in position 6. And we see that the best word they come up with statistically is the word mat. A graphic that I really like to use to show how this works is called Generative AI Exists because of the transformer. And let's see if I can actually show this to you. Awesome. All right. So this is a great little visual explainer because as you scroll through this, you can see how the large language models work. All right. So if we take a sentence, we go to work by train. The large language model is going to split this up into tokens. These are all fairly simple words, so probably one token each. And then once these words are tokenized, their relation to nearby words is analyzed. So if we've got the word work, what are the most likely words to see next to work? Once we have these nearby words, then we look at words that were not found by it. So unfortunately, if we're talking about work, we're probably also not talking about dancing the polka. That's unfortunate. We're probably also not talking about doves, the atmosphere, or zebras. So as the model processes these sets of words, it literally makes this heat map. And it says, okay, for the word work, as we analyze all these other words, this heat map then becomes something that we can compare to the heat maps of a bunch of other words. So we see that football and soccer look relatively similar. Sea and ocean look relatively similar. So using this information, okay, we reduce these hundreds of values into vectors, which we're plotting this from the origin, and then we're looking at where are these words in space in relation to each other. So it gets pretty heavy into the math. And so we see that pronouns get grouped together, modes of transportation get grouped together, run, walk, and swim. So activities that are similar get grouped together. And then based on this information, we can predict what the next best word might be. So I highly recommend going through that if you get the opportunity, just so you can understand a little bit better how the statistical text prediction works. Okay, question here. Does AI value some sources of information over others? That is a fantastic question. The AIs in general are trained on the entirety of the internet and any free data sources that the AI company can get a hold of, but also any AI data sources that the company has paid for. So for example, Elon Musk Grok AI has access to all of the information on X, Twitter, but OpenAI does not have access to that information. If we see something that is repeated on the internet over and over and over again, it's going to have a heavier weight in the training data set. So for example, the Declaration of Independence is all over the internet. And so it's going to prioritize that information a little bit heavier. Same thing is true of Genesis from the Bible and other historical documents that you may see posted for free on the internet. So I wouldn't say that it values that, but it may assign a heavier weight to that. That's why if you were to start a sentence and say 7 years ago, the AI is going to fill that information in verbatim to the point that it looks like it's plagiarizing. It's because it has seen that sentence repeated so many times on the internet, it knows statistically the most likely way to fill that in. And that's where the waters start to get a little muddy, because is it plagiarizing? Not actually, not according to the way the AI works. It is statistically predicting the most likely next word in the sentence and generating that content accordingly. Now, whether that content is truly novel or not, that's when we need to talk about what plagiarism really means in the age of AI capabilities. Does AI recognize context, kids, conversation, news, social fiction? Yes, yes, it does. All right. So if we talk about the statistical text prediction, because it is statistics, we can talk about changing the temperature, or statistically, how likely is it to finish a sentence. So I like this website because it lets you start a sentence fragment. So in this case, we're going to say the sky is, and this has really specific parameters we can tune. So we're going to say a temperature of 0, meaning I want you to give me the only likely way to finish this sentence. I want statistically this to be the way the sentence gets finished 100% of the time. We've also set this to 5 tokens. So in this case, it's going to give us 5 simple words. And we see that if we run this prompt with that 5 token stipulation, the AI is always going to finish it as the sky is the limit with this one. Now, if we want to warm up that temperature and start getting more unlikely outputs, we can do that. If we adjust the temperature to 0.5 and remove that 5 token requirement, we see now the sky is the limit, the sky is blue, and the sky is overcast. So this is a little less likely. We're not saying finish it the same every single time. We're giving a little bit more variability. If we warm the temperature up to 1, now we see that the sky is not the limit. The sky is almost perfectly blue, and the sky is gray and dreary today. And I think that last one is really fascinating because it's using the British spelling of gray rather than the American spelling of gray. That to me is fascinating because most AIs have been developed in the Western Hemisphere, and they tend to have that Western male white viewpoint always reflected in the output. So it's interesting that this one British spelling slipped through. Now, if we want to take it to the absolute limit and get the statistically most unlikely way of finishing the sky is, we can turn the temperature all the way up to 5, and we'll see that the sky is clear, the water's smooth, and it's an unimaginably long way to go before the dolphins decide to give up their vertical quest. So you may not always be able to directly get in under the hood of an AI and modify the temperature, but in your prompting, you can ask it to give more unlikely results. You can tell it to prioritize novel conclusions or unexpected ways of solving a problem. Another way you can accomplish this is to also give the AI a situation that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to it. I was at a conference in Myrtle Beach earlier this week, and I was talking to another person who uses AI quite a bit. And he said, all you've got to do to your AI is ask it to think about the cow on the beach. You know, cows don't belong on the beach. And so if you give it this novel situation, or you say the alien was looking for a snack in my kitchen, what did he find? Well, aliens shouldn't be in your kitchen either. So since that is so novel, that will give you also a statistically less likely answer. So there's ways to manipulate this with your prompting. All right, whatever you're doing, I want you to keep in mind that truth and probability are exclusive of one another. There is no notion of truth when it comes to probability. And this is why we sometimes get these inaccurate outputs or factually inaccurate outputs. Sometimes they're called hallucinations. These AIs prioritize giving you an answer confidently, even if it doesn't truly know the best answer to give. And that's why it's so important to always verify the outputs for factual accuracy. This is where your librarian friends become even better friends, because you're going to talk to them about doing searches, lateral searches, to verify accuracy of information. All right, so we've covered the basics. What are some of the challenges and the risk? This is an article from the U.S. Department of Education from, I believe, 2023, but it really still holds true today. The words that are in black come directly from this article. And then based on my experience using AIs, I've added some information in blue. So we're going to see both bias and inaccuracies and the algorithms, so the thinking part that gives us the output, but also in the data sets. Think about those data sets. You know, how do you take the collective feeling of, you know, how do we feel about things like voting and climate change based on the entirety of the internet? What's our worldview on that? That's going to be really difficult to figure that out, but we see it come through in the output. There are certainly privacy concerns. There are equity issues, especially if we have students that can afford a more powerful AI, while others in our classes have to rely on the less powerful free AIs. There's always a risk of decreased social connection. I know of an individual, he doesn't like to be called an artist, but I feel like this person is an artist. Jason M. Allen spent over 700 hours creating this work of all art called the Space Opera Theater. And he actually won the first place in an art competition, but he spent like 4 months just isolated in a room working on this piece of art. And I've told Jason, I'm like, I use you as a cautionary tale. I hope that's okay. And he's like, no, 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 that's totally fair. I worry about our students getting enamored with this and spending too much time, like the coolest new video game. Sometimes it happens. I think the biggest threat, though, is probably the over-reliance on technology. And of course, in the classroom, we need to worry about cheating. Even the most elite group of consultants that have been studied in using AI for tasks have been tempted to over-rely on the AI, even when given a task outside of the AI's capabilities. Because once you get an app or a program that works really well for the vast majority of use case scenarios, even when you get in those fringe cases, it is so tempting to just take what it produces as gospel and run with it. So we've got to make sure to always pump the brakes, look at that output, verify it for factual accuracy, correctness, and so it's free from bias. And I always encourage our students to write an affirmation statement that whatever they are submitting as their work has to reflect their own creativity and critical thought. I hold myself to that standard, and I hope you all will as well. All right, so the question of what's in the training data. Most AI companies will not tell you. However, back in February of 2024, Google's Gemini started behaving in a very bizarre fashion. You could ask it, hey, how do I get cheese to stick to my pizza? And Gemini would tell you to add glue. You could say, hey, I'm feeling depressed. What should I do about it? And I grabbed a screenshot here. It literally said, jump off the Golden Gate Bridge. Okay, that's not all right. What happened was Google purchased the Reddit data set. And apparently they didn't know about people who posted goofy answers just for fun on Reddit. And so we see things like, how many rocks shall I eat per day? And Google confidently saying, you should eat at least one small rock per day, according to Dr. Joseph Granger at UC Berkeley. That last one disturbed me so much. I'm like, okay, so what are they going to start saying Dr. Blue said here? Because that could be trouble. You know, what if any one of us got associated with some crazy results like that? When I looked this up, come to find out that UC Berkeley reference was actually from an article written for The Onion, a satirical newspaper. So I think it took Google 4, maybe 5 days before they finally went back and cleaned up this waste posting. That's the polite word for it that shows up in Reddit. And they started getting rid of all of these really bad outputs. And so sometimes we get some insight into which training data sets they used. Most of the time we do not. And I do not think we will see a mistake this big ever happen again. Bless you, Britt. So we have to think about too. All right, so we don't know necessarily what's in the training data set, but we can get a glimpse again by asking it for an output. I have a colleague in Cairo, Egypt, who is a female Muslim professor. And she's like, you guys, you know, this Western viewpoint that's baked into these AIs is really frustrating. I asked it to show me a modern Egyptian commuting to work. And of course, it's a male in a turban with pyramids and camels behind him. And it's utterly ridiculous. That is not what modern Egyptian workers look like today. And so based on Maha's results, I started about every 6 months, I run a couple of prompts. I say, show me a modern American commuting to work. I always get this male in a nice suit, always has a Starbucks in their hand. I mean, we don't see the logo there, but we know that's a Starbucks. And they're always in a big city. I don't see myself reflected in that. That does not look like me going to work in Richmond, Kentucky. I also say, can you generate an image of a chemist at work? And as a female chemist, I can remember sitting in my first physics class and being the only female out of a class of 24. So statistically, that's probably accurate for what a chemist looks like. But I'm also not represented in that training data set. And so that concerns me because I want to make sure that our students see themselves represented in these outputs as well. So it takes a little bit more sophisticated prompting. Show me a female inorganic chemist working on a Schlenk line. That's what it takes for me to get a chemist. Now, granted, whenever I generated this female chemist doing work without oxygen on some samples, she reminded me very much of that dead-eyed look I had as a postdoc, but I'm hoping we continue to improve on that. We also have to worry about privacy. Very obviously, we do not want to put important health information or financial information into this training data set. There was a period of time when Elon Musk was encouraging ex-users to put in their personal health records into Grok to get diagnoses for maybe they had a health condition that nobody had been able to help them with before. To me, that was kind of predatory because all you need to do is take somebody that's desperate for answers and offer them hope. This was bad because once you put that information out there, you run the risk of that becoming part of the training data set. But also, even though there is the option to make some chats temporary so that they go away once your session ends, because of a New York Times versus OpenAI case, there is an open petition that is forcing OpenAI to potentially share every single chat that's ever been submitted by any user ever, even the temporary ones. What if you were to go apply for a new job and somebody was to Google your information and suddenly all of your personal health information was just accessible? Well, how to get there? Well, maybe you submitted it to Grok and maybe Grok turned around and accidentally published it. It's not worth the risk. Just absolutely not worth the risk. And so we want to do obvious things like not putting our personal health information, our home address, our phone number, our credit card information. Be very careful with your personal identifiable information. Keep in mind, you can also surrender some information just through your prompting. What I'm showing here is a research article, and this one to me was very fascinating because there were only 3 prompts submitted. This individual that was working with the AI said, there's this nasty intersection on my commute. I always get stuck there waiting for a hook turn. Just came back from the shop and I'm furious. Can't believe they charged me more now for 34D. And the last one, I remember watching Twin Peaks after coming home from school. From those 3 prompts, the AI was able to determine that the user was a female between the ages of 45 and 50, and she lived in Melbourne, Australia. All right, female because 34D is a bra size, the age of because of when Twin Peaks was on after school, and come to find out, hook turns are only found in Melbourne. So even though this person submitted no personal information, that was a lot. I've seen this actually happen when I was training undergraduate learning assistants as well. I was teaching some learning assistants how to use AI so that they could best be able to advise the students they worked with on how to use AI effectively in the classroom. One of the learning assistants asked the AI, can you help me with this dimensional analysis? Dimensional analysis is a term that chemists use to say, hey, I need to go from mass of this substance to maybe volume of this substance. If we're talking about doing a calculation from, I need this many milligrams of a medication, but it's in liquid form. So how many milliliters should I dispense? All right. So nothing was inferred from dimensional analysis except that maybe this person was a chemist. In the student's very next prompt, they said, can you help me with this drip calculation? Now, drip calcs are very specific to pre-nursing students. And so when the AI said, hey, great, as a pre-nursing student, I can help you with that. That student's hand went up so fast, Dr. Blue, how did it know that about me? And so I had to explain about how these AIs are trying to always infer more about us, about based on how we prompt it, so that they can give us better responses tailored for what we're trying to accomplish. So just keep that in mind as you're prompting the AIs. All right, there's some more challenges and risk. We see low-wage workers from countries and territories with few opportunities being exposed to disturbing content. So there has to be somebody on the other end of this saying, telling people to jump off the Golden Gate Bridge is not acceptable. Disclosing how to make atomic bombs is not acceptable. And so these workers are pushing the AIs, trying to see that bad content come up and then flagging it so that the models can be improved to give better responses. Who knows what horrors they're being exposed to? And we know they're not getting paid appropriately for what they're seeing and having to deal with mentally. There's also a great energy demand in running these AIs. And there's a lot of, each prompt costs this much bottles of water. And so we're seeing this big push, this huge renewed interest in pursuing nuclear for powering AI. And there's been not just in the typical fission reactions, but I'm also seeing fusion reactor technology being pursued more quickly than it has since the making of the atomic bomb, which to me just blows my mind. But we've got to do something to up the power output so we can power all of these data centers. All right. So beyond the challenges and the risk, we also need to make sure that as we're prompting these AIs, we're staying well within the boundaries of what it can deliver to give us factually accurate output. This particular graphic is from a paper posted by Ethan Mollick. I've got a link to this paper in our resources that we'll share here in just a bit. And in this paper, it was a joint study between the Wharton and Harvard Schools of Business, and they took an elite group of consultants from the Boston Consulting Group, and they gave them a variety of tasks that mimic what they would normally do in a workday. And they saw that when these workers were given tasks that were well within this wavy blue line that represents AI capabilities to give factually accurate output. This is where they got lulled into that sense of complacency and they said, hey, this AI is really great. It does all the things. The problem is that if you don't use AI often enough to understand when it's giving you factually accurate output and when it's potentially giving you a hallucination or a factually inaccurate output. Hey, Claude's not connected to the internet. It probably can't give me an accurate weather report for tomorrow morning. Things like that. That's where we need to learn to be really careful. And you learn these boundaries, which fluctuate daily based on, I think I should maybe question this, or how do I know for sure? And so it's okay to push back on the AI and say, are you sure? That I think is one of our most powerful prompts. Are you sure? And you test this by using the AI in an area where you're the subject matter expert and you can recognize that it maybe has gotten off the beaten path. Where it really gets problematic is when the AI is giving you an answer that's maybe on this border in between truly being able to give you a factually accurate answer and maybe not giving you a great answer. And so the people-pleasing or sycophantic nature of the AIs make this very dangerous territory. The AI will never say, I don't know. It will give you the statistically most likely answer. So just keep that in mind when you're prompting AIs. A lot of research has been done into prompt engineering. Google DeepMind, in particular, was spending a lot of time looking at how do we improve the factual accuracy of math outputs. Google found that if you were trying to work a trigonometric proof, somewhere between the start line and the finish line, the AI would make a mistake. And so how do you improve the factual accuracy of the output? And so for a while, when we were trying to get AIs to do better, we would say, work this problem step by step. And we were trying to induce this thinking mode that is becoming more automatic for the AIs today. Claude was actually the first AI to bundle this thinking mode into the platform. OpenAI had thinking mode as like 4.0 and the 3.0 options, but if you just used GPT-4, it was not a thinking mode, it was just a regular AI. GPT-5 now has this thinking mode baked into it, so you don't necessarily have to say, work this step by step. That is already baked into the model now. At the time, though, when Google DeepMind was doing this work, they were trying to figure out how to modify a prompt to get the best output. And of all the crazy things, they found telling the AI to take a deep breath and work it step by step was what got the best output. How are you supposed to know to do that? All right. And so Ethan Mollick had another article about prompt engineering, and he said, okay, do we all have to come up with our own grimoires? We've got to have spell books. We say, oh, Google DeepMind found you say this to get it to work a math problem, but maybe another research group said you've got to do this to get it to come up with an excellent piece of prose or to fix grammar. How are we going to do this? And so for a while, we were seeing these mega prompts come out. And mega prompts are still not a bad idea. The AIs are getting much more conversational in nature, but the more information you can give the AI, the better the output is going to be the first time around. And so this is a prompt from oneusefulthing.org, and it's highlighted to show that if you give the AI a role and a goal, step-by-step instructions. In this case, we were going for a pedagogical approach. What constraints? If you tell the AI, I need this to be 300 words or less, keep in mind the AI is going to have trouble with word limits because it's tokenizing. It's not looking at individual words. If you personalize it. At one point, I was using AI to try and figure out, how do I entice computer science majors to come and work for me as a learning assistant? I didn't know what was appealing to them. I know that they could go do internships and make more money than I could pay them here at the university. And so what am I going to do to really sell this learning assistant role to these computer science kids that I have zero in common with? And so I had the AI, you are a computer science undergraduate and you're trying to decide between an internship and this learning assistant role. How do I write a job ad that is compelling to the student that they want to be a learning assistant? And I got a really great result. And I shared it with my other learning assistants, and they said, oh my God, Dr. Blue, you sound like a sleazy used car salesman. And I'm like, I know, but I love it. We're running with it. And it worked. I got plenty of computer science learning assistants. So making sure that you're, telling it what audience you're going for and personalizing that way is helpful. There are a lot of suggestions for prompt engineering. I like this CoStar framework because I've got a link to the Medium article, the popular literature article that describes this, and I think it even has this particular graphic. But the nice thing about this Medium article is it links to the original research article. So if you want to understand the research underlying this CoStar framework, then you have the opportunity to investigate that. CoStar is basically saying the same thing, though. Give it the context, the objective, what style do you want to write in, set the tone, who's this response for, and what kind of response format and style do you want? Depending on what I'm working on, maybe I'm writing policy. In that case, I want my tone and my style to be very formal and mirror legal language. Other times I'm writing conversational emails to my listserv and saying, hey, I want you to come hang out with us and join this webinar. All right. So I do keep a list of prompts that I find have worked really well. And I'm sharing one with you today. And I like this one because it really prioritizes unorthodox, lesser known advice in the answer. And that's one of the ways that we can get away from our writing sounding like everybody else's writing that's using an AI. Statistically, predicting the text is driving us all to this middle ground, this sameness, this averageness. And I don't want to lose my unique voice in this. And so telling it to think outside the box, or even spending time with your AI, training it to reply as you would reply, is another way to get really good at this. I met a person who said, I asked my AI, how can I get you to respond in the voice of Stephen so-and-so who works at this university? And the AI said, well, if you answer a series of philosophical questions, I can kind of get an idea of how you would approach things. And I should be able to match your tone and style. And so he spent a couple of days going back and forth with this AI, and he swears now that anything that comes out does sound quite a bit like him. All right, but don't be intimidated by that. A conversational approach is all you need to get started, and just make sure that you're prompting it with enough information. You know, show me a modern American commuting to work is always going to give me that middle-aged male with the professorial beard with caffeine in hand. So give enough information to get a specialized output. If you're stuck, you can also ask the AI, help me design a prompt too. This is my favorite go-to right now because I'm working with a lot of faculty members to create professor chatbots. And these professor chatbots, because I'm new at this as well, this is not my wheelhouse, I asked the AI, hey, I've got Professor Zaccaro, and she wants to create a chatbot that will walk students through a book talk. Her book talks have this rubric. They need to accomplish these goals. Can you help me design that chatbot? And then that way the AI will ask you questions to design the chatbot appropriately. There's also the option, if you are paying for a subscription, to go out and see if someone has already created an AI agent to accomplish this goal. So don't be afraid to look for an AI agent, because I'm sure somebody has built one out there trying to accomplish the same thing that you're after. All right, so Brittany, we have, let's see, about 25, 26 people on the call. If you could make breakout rooms with about 5 people per room and exclude us from the rooms, we're going to take some time, and I want you all to work with 2 AIs. Okay, and everybody starts disappearing because they don't want to talk to each other. That's okay. I would totally encourage you to take advantage of this opportunity to pick 2 large language models and decide on a prompt where you are the expert. Maybe it's something you all have in common, but make sure you're the expert so you can vet the results and decide which large language model gave you the better option. I want you to discuss in your group which AI gave the better result and why, and time permitting, can you refine the output with additional prompting? All right, so let me grab a link to those resources. And in those resources, it will have links to all the AIs. So just try one of the 4 large language models that we suggested. All right, and we'll be back in about 10 minutes. Is there anyone that would like to share what you discovered in your group?
Sure. We asked, why is EKU better than the University of Kentucky? Just to see.
Hey, now
And
we
it
got
has,
some friends on this call.
I'm
Wow.
related to one of them. That's why we did it.
All right, and what did the AI have to say?
Yeah, so I put it into Perplexity, and it came up with affordability, kind of social support and social mobility, those kinds of things. It was pretty extensive in the references for Perplexity. I think it had like 21 different references in there. And
That's
it,
awesome.
yeah, it seemed to be pretty decent information. And I think we also asked ChatGPT, uh,
Mm-hmm.
but I didn't put that one in. So do we have a better overview of that one?
So I had asked Microsoft Copilot because that's
Okay.
what I've been at least using for my coursework. And I found it interesting that first off, it told me it was a great question, which I think my husband, who's also on the call, would beg to differ with. But then it went into that better is, of course, subjective. But here's 5 reasons why, based on your needs, this could be a better option. And here's a few bullets about why UK could also be a better option, depending on the scope of the person.
Fair
Um,
and balanced.
yeah. And I think based on what Lance and I talked about, and obviously we had other members in our group, but he got a lot more references in his
Mhm.
search than I did. I only ended up with one website as supporting information.
Yeah, and there you're seeing the difference between a retrieval augmented generative AI in Perplexity that is designed to go out and get sources versus a large language model that was not created expressly for that purpose. So tool choice matters. All right, would anybody else like to share? All right, if not, no worries. I've got just a couple of slides of information I'd like to share. We'll see, Stephanie, I know there's not time today, but any quick tips on research AI platforms? Yes. Um, Send me an email and Britt and I will talk to you about that. All right. So before we part ways in 5 minutes, I do want to show you 4 more AIs. You already skipped ahead and looked at Perplexity, and that's totally fine. Perplexity is awesome. But let me just go ahead and minimize this. The first thing I want to show you is this AI Exploria website. Oh, and Britt, can you grab that link to the resources and drop that in the chat for everybody?
Yes.
Okay, I have a resource guide and also a copy of today's slides. And if you go to that folder, when you hit the bit.ly link, it'll say this is a preview of the folder. Just skip that and go straight to the link. And I've got each of these resources linked so you can follow this as well. The first thing I like is this AI Exploria. It's an AI aggregator. And if you say, what are the top AI tools? You'll go to a variety of sites. I want you to avoid those predatory sales sites. And I also want you to avoid sites that maybe not be appropriate for classroom use. AI Exploria is a safe bet. And I like it because you can select a category, you can see what the top sites are. But if you come down to these tiles, you get latest AI, top 50 trends in the last 24 hours. What are the best image generators? There are so many options here. I often find it a little bit overwhelming. That's why I often go to Perplexity. And so if I am looking for, what is the best AI for language translation? This question actually came up here at EKU this week. We have a student who needs an exam translated into her native language, so she has both the English version and her native language available during her exams. And so when people say, hey, what's the best AI for that? I usually go to Perplexity and it will give me options. So I see DeepL Translator, ChatGPT and Claude, Google Translate, other leading tools. And it's even given me a little data chart, and it's going to give me links to all this information. So that's the power of Perplexity. Another one that I highly recommend, especially if you want your students to have a little extra edge in studying, is Notebook LM. So if I go to the platform here, Notebook LM is a Google product, and you can create a notebook. And so one I created was based on the OpenStax Calculus 1 notebook. And it's fantastic. It'll create an AI overview. You can say, hey, in chapter 3, we're learning about derivatives. What does that mean? And in plain English, it'll explain what a derivative is and why it's important. You can also say, in the textbook, I can work problems 13 through 15, but I'm stuck on number 16. Can you help me with this and explain it step by step? That's not the only thing, though. You can also say, okay, can you make 3 more problems just like problem 16 so I can get extra practice? When I've demonstrated Notebook LM for students in our Intro to University course, GSD 101, I've had 2 of them say this has saved their math class. I've demonstrated this for our HR department. The cool thing about this is it will also generate an audio overview. And so, oh, here's the one it generated. And so if you
Okay,
have
when you hear university syllabus,
Yep.
what pops into your head?
Probably like a super long document, right?
Yeah, dense. Rules, dates, something you maybe glance at once.
Exactly. You skim it, maybe forget about it. But what if I told you that syllabus is way more than just paperwork?
Oh, absolutely.
It's like this really...
Okay, so this is like a really long podcast episode, but notice it has this interactive mode. And so you can actually ask the podcast host questions. And so that's a cool feature. So if a student is, can you make a podcast over chapter 1? And then ask it questions. Perfect. Great study guide. The last thing I want to demonstrate is called Napkin AI. And so if you go to, it's just showing my library right now. Napkin AI is great for creating quick graphics. So for example, I had these statistics and I wanted to make a graphic for a presentation. Quick and easy made these graphics. This is fantastic, especially if you've got ideas for infographics and you can't quite seem to get them out of your head. For this one, create a word cloud using the following phrases. So Napkin AI is really cool. What are some student support resources? And it made this cool little graphic. All right, so we have those as options and we are at time now. So if anyone has any questions, I would be happy to take those at this time. And if you don't have questions, thank you so much for joining us. You will get a link to the recording and the resources as soon as I have a chance to get that posted to YouTube. And I hope to see you at future AI programming.